Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Almassian. I'm sure you heard about the blast that hit the Crimean Bridge. I think it's a very important event that we have to discuss today. But before that, I want to discuss with you the counteroffensive of Ukraine and why the failure of the counteroffensive of Ukraine may have led to this current attack on the Crimean Bridge. This would be my analysis for today. But first things first, there is a video circulating on the social media platforms that allegedly say that this is the blast that hit the Crimean Bridge, which, by the way, guys, the Crimean Bridge is very important because it connects the Russian mainland to the Crimean Peninsula. And without this bridge, the Russian side cannot provide any sort of, let's say, aid or the basic necessities for the people or any military equipment, etc. So if the Ukrainian army or the Ukrainian side successfully manages to destroy completely this bridge, the mainland will be separated from the peninsula of Crimea. But first, let's see the blast that is allegedly belongs to this Crimean attack. To be honest with you, this is a huge blast. I'm not saying it's some sort of a Scud missile, but the amount of TNT that was in this bomb, whatever was it a drone or an underwater unmanned vehicle? We don't know yet concretely, but I'm going to discuss that in the next segment of this video. But first, because in the past few videos, I told you that the counteroffensive of Ukraine is not advancing as the Ukrainian side or the American side or the British side want to. And I received a lot of criticism for saying that, and a lot of people on Twitter, they assure me from these NAFO trolls that no, the counteroffensive is progressing and the counteroffensive is advancing. And unfortunately for them, the New York Times, which is of course is an integral part of the American establishment media regime, they published this article, and there were three columnists and experts discussing the counteroffensive. The title says, after suffering heavy losses, Ukrainians paused to rethink strategy. In the first 2 weeks of Ukraine's grueling counteroffensive, as much as 20% of the weaponry it sent to the battlefield was damaged or destroyed. And to be very honest with you guys, if the New York Times says 20%, I would just multiply it into two. And I would say 40% because they're trying to limit the damages and the damages in the media and also on the battlefield. So if the New York Times confessing today that it's 20%, I would say it's 40%. I'm not saying that I have an evidence for it, but I have a long experience with the mainstream media and the tactics of limiting the damages, limiting the reputation damages, limiting the military damages of the actors that they're trying to protect. And in this case, it is Ukraine. And when they say 20%, I would definitely say it's 40%. So they lost 20% of the weaponry they sent to the battlefield, and they were damaged or destroyed, according to American and European officials. The toll includes some of the formidable Western fighting machines, for example, tanks and armored personnel carriers. The Ukrainians were counting on to beat back the Russians. The startling rate of losses dropped to about 10% in the ensuing weeks, the officials said, preserving more of the troops and machines needed for the major offensive push that the Ukrainians say is still to come. Guys, they say the death toll is too high, and now it's becoming less. It's becoming 10%, for example, okay, the losses, whether it's in the personnel or it's in the armored vehicles. But they're also saying in the same paragraph that is because the counteroffensive has been paused, or the speed of the counteroffensive has been decreased. Therefore, it's logical to assume that the losses will be also less, right? It's not like because the Ukrainian side has developed some better counter-offensive strategy. No, just because they paused. That's why they're having less losses in their ranks. The losses have also showed because the counteroffensive itself has slowed, so like I argued, and even halted in places as Ukrainian soldiers struggle against Russia's formidable defenses. One Ukrainian soldier said in an interview this week that his unit's drone picked up footage of a half dozen Western armored vehicles caught in an artillery barrage south of the town of Velika Novosilka. Quote, "They all burned," said the soldier who identified himself as Sergeant Igor. Russia had many months to prepare for the counteroffensive, and the front is littered with mines, tank traps, and dug in troops, while Russian reconnaissance drones and attack helicopters fly overhead with increasing frequency. Given those fortifications, experts say it is not surprising that Ukraine would sustain relatively severe losses in the early stages of the campaign. So, again, as I mentioned, they're trying to justify the losses of the Ukrainian army here by saying, yeah, it's just the early stages. So it's normal that tens of thousands of Ukrainians are dying. But in the next stage, the second stage, and the third stage, and the advanced stage, this is not going to happen. The Ukrainians will definitely defeat the Russians. This is what I'm getting. This is the impression that I'm getting from this article, right? And they say the Russian side had months to prepare. Of course, they had months to prepare for this counteroffensive because the Ukrainian side, the British side, American side, they all declared even the date of the counteroffensive. They said in the spring and then in the summer. Of course, Russia prepared itself and they were well prepared for a counteroffensive by the Ukrainian side, and they knew the tactics, the military tactics, because they know the trainers. Once you know the trainer is the British army, the American army, the German army, you studied their military tactics, so you can foresee what's coming next, right? This week, Ukraine's President Zelensky acknowledged that there had been a brief pause in operations some weeks ago, but blamed it on a lack of equipment and munitions and called on Western allies to quicken the pace of deliveries. I do not really understand this logic. If I'm the the chief of the military. I'm leading allegedly this military. Of course, Zelensky is a clown, right? He doesn't know anything about the military affairs. So whoever is in charge of the military, if I don't have enough ammunition, or if I don't have the factories to produce enough ammunition and military equipment in order to fight an enemy, why would I engage with this part, with my enemy in an act of hostilities? And if my enemy attacked me first, and there was a chance for you to strike a deal, and we're talking about in February and March 2022, and you refused that because the British side told you and the American side told you that, no, don't sign on a fucking peace treaty because we're going to give you all the weapons you need to defend yourself. And now we are in July, in mid July 2023, while they were mocking the Russian side and they were saying, "Oh, Russia is going out of ammunition. Russia no more has missiles." It seems that the Western side no more has ammunition now, and Zelensky is also saying we need more ammunition. And the Biden administration, Biden himself, confessed that they don't have more ammunition anymore. That's why they're sending cluster bombs, right? And this is the issue here. So it's written here: the Biden administration agreed to send Ukraine cluster munitions, which have been known to cause indiscriminate harm to civilians and have been banned by many countries. But US officials and military analysts say the weapons may not have an immediate impact in the war. So even if the Ukrainian side receive these cluster bombs, they will not change. Even the Americans agree that this will not change the balance of power on the ground. So why are they doing that? I was reading the other day a tweet for Elon Musk, and he says the only thing that will change in the Ukraine war, if they sign on a treaty now or in the future, is the body count. How many people more will die? At the end, they will sit on the table and sign on a peace treaty with Russia. And that's the only way out, right? But they ridicule such arguments and they ridicule such people and they try to portray as if Elon Musk is a pro-Russian person while he's giving this Starlink and I don't know this internet satellites to Ukrainian military, and they're using it against the Russian army, right? So, military experts have long said that the first 15 miles of the counteroffensive would be the hardest, as attacking troops generally need 3 times more power, whether in weapons, personnel, or both, than defending forces. So, the experts say the first 15 miles will be the most difficult. Let's suppose this is correct. But this is conditioned with that generally the attacking forces they need 3 times more power in terms of the weapons and the personnel than the defending forces. So in this case, the attacking forces are Ukraine. Does Ukraine have 3 times more weapons and 3 times more personnel? No. Russia has 3 times more personnel and 3 times more weaponry than Ukraine. So how is this situation going to be solved? How is Ukraine going to breach the defense lines of Russia and achieve some military successes? I don't see it, like they're contradicting themselves all the time. And when you say, I care about the Ukrainian people, I don't want them to die, and this is the fact, you become a Putinist. This is so ridiculous. Ukraine's top military officer, General Zaluzny, expressed frustration that Ukraine is fighting without Western F 16 warplanes, which the United States only recently agreed to allow Ukrainian pilots to be trained on, but which are not expected to be delivered for several months at least. That has left the Ukrainian troops vulnerable to the Russian helicopters and artillery. Okay. Why the Ukrainian army would launch the counteroffensive if they know, which they should, that without aerial cover, they cannot win this counteroffensive or achieve any, let's say, tangible achievements underground or advances underground? Why would you go into counteroffensive and wage an attack on the Russian forces if you don't have an aerial support? You knew it, and now you're blaming your Western partners that they haven't given you yet the F-16. And the funny thing is, even if the Western side gave and supplied Ukraine with F-16, does Ukraine have any operational military bases? And if they do, can't the Russian army destroy them? Okay. So Ukraine will remain very vulnerable in this regard. So what are they going to do? Are they going to use the military air bases of Poland? If yes, then doesn't that mean that Russia will retaliate on these air bases in Poland, which is a NATO country, which eventually means World War III because NATO will have to intervene? I don't understand this really. Sometimes it's crazy. The Ukrainian authorities say the army has so far advanced the deepest in southern areas of the Donetsk region, but no more than about 5 miles from the former front line at Velika Novosilka. It faces another 55 miles to reach the Sea of Azov, a primary goal of the counteroffensive, as it would cut the land bridge to Crimea. This is the goal, right? So this is when this is failed, the counteroffensive is failed, right? Now they're trying to hit the Crimean Bridge through terrorist attacks. And I would call it a terrorist attack because they're basically attacking civilian infrastructure used by civilians, and they killed 2 civilians for political reasons. This is the definition of terrorism. This is Marcos Papadopoulos on Mayadeen TV. He's speaking about I hosted him. You guys remember him very well. He's addressing the military supplies to Ukraine, and he argues that no amount of military supply to Ukraine will lead to a successful counteroffensive from the Ukrainian side against the Russian forces. Let's watch it together.
The decision to supply cluster bombs to the Ukrainian government is a sign of abject desperation and abject frustration on behalf of the American government concerning the direction of the war in Ukraine. Because irrespective of what the useful idiots who comprise Western mainstream media say, the reality is that Russia is winning the war in Ukraine, and indeed has been winning the war in Ukraine ever since the Russian army entered Ukraine on the 24th of February of 2022. Now, that reality has become all the more acute for Washington, given the calamity that is the so-called counteroffensive of the Ukrainian army in Zaporozhye and also in the southern part of the Donetsk Oblast. Because this so-called offensive by the Ukrainian army, which is now in roughly has been going on for about 4 weeks, has been, as I said, a complete catastrophe. Approximately 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers have perished, together with hundreds and hundreds of Ukrainian armored vehicles which have been destroyed. So, by the Americans now deciding to send cluster bombs to the Ukrainian government, this is a way of the Americans, firstly, trying to kill as many Russian soldiers as possible, and secondly, trying to cause as many obstacles as possible for the impending Russian offensive in Ukraine, which will be enormous. So whatever the Americans now send to the Ukrainian government, nothing can avert what will be the inevitable outcome of the war in Ukraine, a Russian victory, which will see the Russian army capture either all of Ukraine or most of Ukraine, and then the lands which the Russian army have captured will be absorbed into the Russian Federation.
I mean, it's very, in my opinion, what he says is I relatively agree with him. And in the second part, he also argues about the amount of the ammunition that the Western powers are sending. Let's watch the rest first.
Be a game changer.
Okay.
Then they're supposed to be a game changer.
Is based on the desperation of the US, because this is a war and allies should support each other. Why do you consider that there's a desperation on this level?
Well, first of all, how many so-called game changers have there been thus far in the war in Ukraine? First of all, there was the supply to the Ukrainian government of anti-tank weapons, which was supposed to be a game changer. Then there was the supply of the M777 artillery gun to the Ukrainian government, which was supposed to be a game changer. Then there was the supply of the HIMARS, which was supposed to be a game changer. Then there was the supply of German Leopard and British Challenger tanks, which were supposed to be game changers. Then there was the supply of depleted uranium, which was supposed to be a game changer. Then there was the supply of British Storm cruise missiles, which was supposed to be a game changer. Then there is the talk of F-16s being sent to Ukraine, which are supposed to be a game changer. Now, some in the West are saying that cluster bombs will be a game changer. The reality is that regardless of what the Americans and the British and any other Western government sends to Ukraine, now that the Russian army is in Ukraine and is entrenched in Ukraine, nothing will dislodge the Russians from there. The Ukrainians to date have lost, in terms of fatalities, in terms of soldiers, between 250,000 and 300,000. Those are losses which cannot be sustained. The Ukrainian losses at Bakhmut, for example, were simply tremendous in that many of the Ukrainian army's best legions were destroyed there. And regarding the so-called Ukrainian counteroffensive in Zaporozhye and in Donetsk, again, it is believed that some 20,000 Ukrainian soldiers in a period of about 4 weeks have died there. And the Ukrainian army hasn't even come up against the first line of the Russian defense. That is simply appalling. And it demonstrates to anyone with even an ounce of military knowledge that the Ukrainian army is virtually a spent force. If we take the so-called Ukrainian counteroffensive, the Ukrainians attacked without any air cover whatsoever. On top of that, if the Ukrainians were going to be successful, they should have firstly had air supremacy. And at the same time, they should have pounded the Russian defense lines for weeks on end with artillery and air power. And yet, there are no Ukrainian aircraft in the air. There was no Ukrainian pounding of Russian defense lines. All that happened was that the Ukrainian high command ordered their ground forces to advance on what are the strongest defense fortifications anywhere in the world, with the inevitable result that those Ukrainian ground forces would be.
Guys, this is very fascinating the way he explains. Some people may find that he is very bold in his conclusions, but he's so correct on so many things. And I can assure you guys, the vast majority of the people who support Ukraine, they have no clue what are they talking about when it comes to military affairs. And I'm not claiming to be a military expert, but I followed the Syrian war and I know what the defense line means, and I know what fortification means, and I know how can you surpass or destroy a fortification. And the experience told us in Syria, without an aerial superiority and without an artillery power, you cannot destroy fortifications and the defense lines so that you can advance if you are launching a counteroffensive. So at the beginning, they said anti-tank missiles will be game changer, and then said the M77 missiles with the missiles will be game changer, and then they said the HIMARS will be game changer, and then said free the Leopards and free the Challengers, and all these tanks will be a game changer, and then the depleted uranium will be game changer, and then the Storm cruise missiles will be game changer, and now they're saying F-16 and the cluster bombs will be game changer. No, they won't be game changer. They're lying to you. I mean, I don't know why I feel like I have the responsibility to tell these things, because tens of thousands more Ukrainians will die. That's just the case. And the problem is that the Ukrainian army already suffered between 250 to 300,000 casualties, and this is not only unsustainable but also irreplaceable. How are you going to replace all these soldiers? And now even the mainstream media acknowledges that the Ukrainian army is forcing people to go to fight. And the moment they capture a man in the street and they send him to training, they train him to 4 to 5 days, and then they send him to the front lines. This is a meat grinder. You're sending people to their immediate death against a professional superpower. They don't stand a chance. And if you're Ukrainian and watching this, if you were irritated, I don't care. I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you a bitter truth instead of sugar-coated lies. And so in order to crush the first defensive lines of the Russian forces, you need aerial superiority, or at least some fighter jets. And two, you need strong artillery. But when it comes to the aerial, let's say, fighter jets, I already told you, most of the Ukrainian air bases are not operational. The rest are under the radar of the Russian army. So are they going to use the Polish air bases? I don't know. It's really crazy what's happening. So this was an act of desperation, in my opinion, because the counteroffensive failed, whose main goal was to cut the mainland of the Russian Federation with the Crimean side, right? This is the goal, to reach to the Sea of Azov. And they failed. That's why today they bombed the Crimean Bridge. And this is also just a quick, guys, for you to know what was the attack about and where is it geographically. And he explains perfectly, in my opinion, the new Atlas. I think his name is I forgot his name, but he's a really good, in my opinion, analyst, amazing analyst, and he was a former Marine Corps as well. He's a geopolitical analyst. Let's check it. Let's take it look together.
Today is July 17th, 2023. I want to talk about the Crimean Bridge. It's been struck once again. There is a damaged road section. There are two roadways. One is damaged. One section of one roadway is damaged. As you can see in this footage, the railway is still operational. This footage is taken by a train operating on the railway section of the bridge. Since this is a story that is still developing, in the comment section below, in a pinned comment, I will include information about the extent of the damage as well as what exactly caused the damage. I think it's very clear that it was an attack, but by what munition? If you're watching this on Telegram, I will add additional posts regarding developing information. Now, just in case you don't know where the Crimean Bridge is, this is Ukraine. In red is Russian-held territory. Crimea joined the Russian Federation after a referendum in 2014. And right here in the Kerch Strait, you can see the bridge right here. And I'm going to get into what all of this other stuff is, this port and these dotted lines, the ferries that go back and forth. I will get into that in just a moment.
So this is just quickly for you guys to know the location of the place and what happened to the bridge. The Russian side, they blamed Ukraine, and Russia blames Kiev for deadly drone attack on Crimean Bridge. Russian authorities on Monday accused Kiev of attacking the Crimea Bridge, killing 2 people. They don't say they're civilians. They don't even mention that. And damaging part of the roadway that connects the Moscow-annexed peninsula with southern Russia, Krasnodar region. They don't even say that the Crimea side joined the Russian Federation after a referendum. They call it an annexation. Just hours earlier, Russia's investigative committee, which probes serious crimes, launched a criminal investigation into what it called a terrorist attack. And I explained to you why it is a terrorist attack. It is a terrorist attack that was orchestrated by Ukrainian special services. The investigative committee also confirmed that the husband and the wife had been killed in the attack while their daughter was hospitalized with injuries. And I will show you the photo of the family who were driving the car. This is the family. A 14-year-old girl is hospitalized in a critical condition, and both her parents are dead after today's Ukrainian government terrorist attack on the Crimean Bridge. The father was a truck driver, and the mother was a consul worker for Belgorod. This is the family, the victim. So there is a theory that is also circulated on social media. This is the last thing on this attack. The attack on the Crimean Bridge was allegedly carried out using a British Marine underwater autonomous robot, Remus 600, with an additional load of explosives. This was reported by the Telegram channel resident, citing a source in Zelensky's office. Remus 600 can move underwater at depth of up to 600 meters. It is controlled from a laptop. Quote, the launch was carried out from a civilian vessel in the Black Sea. It has a flight duration of about 70 hours at a speed of up to 5 knots. With an increased carrying capacity, it has a range of 286 nautical miles, almost 500 kilometers, writes the resident. Earlier, Maria Zakharova said that American and British intelligence services were involved in planning the attack, and this is it. I'm not sure if they use similar things to also blow up the Nord Stream pipelines. So before I end up this conversation, the other day I posted a tweet which went very viral. And of course, when a tweet about Ukraine goes very viral, the trolls of NAFO, they come and they try to troll you. This is what they do, unfortunately. I mean, they're not irritating me or bothering me at all. But I'm just going to address this because they're trying to ridicule it. So I said my landlord in Berlin increased the rent twice since February 2022. The electricity bill increased 40% and groceries jumped 20 to 40% too. Are we financing America's war against Russia? So I don't know why is this so controversial. Because, first of all, this is not Europe's war. This is my opinion. And they say there is a freedom of opinion and freedom of expression here, right? So I'm expressing my free opinion, and I think this is not Europe's war. This is America's war. And the Europeans, because they're allies with the United States, and because the United States has a strong influence over the European continent, they forced the European countries or persuaded them to participate in this war. So when the German government, let's say, increases the expenditure on its own defense or sends billions of dollars to Ukraine, and its critical or the most important gas source, which was blown up by the United States, right? The Nord Stream pipelines. When you like gather all these considerations, why are the prices increasing, right? Why my landlord is increasing the prices? Because his expenses are also increasing. And his taxes are also increasing, so he has to take it from our pocket. Why the groceries are increasing? Because the production of the groceries or any product that you buy from the market has skyrocketed. The companies in Germany are bankrupting. They're moving to China, they're moving to the United States. And this is a topic that I'm going to discuss soon on Syriana Analysis with a hopefully German guest, the industrialization of Germany. The industries of Germany need steady flow of energy, right? Gas. They don't have it. So they have a limited amount. The prices are twofold or threefold. So the production process is way more expensive. So from who are they getting this money? From us. So all this financing of the war is happening from the pockets of the people, not from the taxpayers, right? From the pockets of the taxpayers. Do you think the politicians are paying from their pockets? They're not even feeling the burden on their shoulders. We are the ones paying for this. And I'm not even German. I live in Germany. And nobody asked my opinion if I want to finance this war. And I thought it is a democracy that we have to ask. And this is not a minor decision. We're not talking about like, oh, the German government is sending a watch to Ukraine. They're sending Leopards. They're sending billions of dollars of aid. So the people, do the people want it? I believe at the beginning, most of the people, they wanted it. Now, I believe most of the people don't. And I'm basing my opinion on my subjective opinion and my interaction with the people, but also on the polls. And you can see nowadays that the far right party, they call it far right, right? Although this far right group AfD, they oppose the far right and nationalist and neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine, while the others who claim to be opposing the neo-Nazis and the nationalist groups, they're the ones supporting them. Anyways, the AfD, they have, if the elections today, if they do elections today, they receive 21%. They had 11% in the last elections. They are now 21%. And more than the SPD, the Social Democrats, and way more than the Greens, who are the two most powerful parties in the coalition, the ruling coalition. So the AfD has more points than the ruling coalition. And I think Germany is heading to a very dark times economically, and the German welfare will be eradicated, the economic welfare. And this will lead eventually to the rise of the AfD, because they're the only opposition party who are opposing the government policies. The other opposition party, quote unquote, which is the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, former Merkel's party, which they ruled around 16 years, they're not even opposition. They're agreeing with the current government in every action they do in Ukraine. So how is it an opposition party? The only opposition, or let's say the only effective opposition to the government, is coming from the AfD, which is the right-wing group. The other opposition is some of the politicians from the left-wing party, the Linke. But if the elections happen today, they don't even receive 5%, so they don't even have a popularity. Oh, sometimes it hurts me to the core, really, that I live here and I love this country and I respect the people, and I'm very grateful that they hosted me in Germany from Syria. in Germany. Yeah. Um, but, and I feel sorry because I can see what's going to come next. And unfortunately, I cannot say more. And I believe there are so many things that I believe could happen in Germany, and those are really bad things that I don't wish for these things to happen for the German people. But wrong decisions, wrong policies, and insisting on the mistakes, that's the problem, And probably, just probably, because the Western world has lived quite long time in stability, peace, welfare. So good times brought weak men, and weak men now will bring hard times. So it's a circle. And then when they have hard times, they will probably have good men again or strong men again. So we will see how things will develop. Tomorrow, I will most probably interview Vanessa Billy because the BBC published a documentary on Syria. And we will discuss the propaganda in this BBC documentary. So definitely, guys, stay tuned, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with your friends. And also, if you want to support my independent work like the one I'm doing right now, please become a patron. The link is in the description below, and see you next time.